Kia ora e ho, ngā mihi nui mō tō mahi I tēnei kaupapa. Welcome to our session today. It's great to have you here to talk about how the Kaupapa Māori, the journey of the Kaupapa Māori guidelines. If you'd like to take some time to introduce yourself.
Kia ora, thanks. Ko tainui tuaka tararu te maunga o taki tawa Ngāti Raukawa te iwi, nai te horu te hapu, ko Raukawa te marae, ko joy te iwi te tuku ingoa. Thanks for the opportunity to come and speak about the good practice guidelines. Really appreciate it.
Could you tell us about the journey to get to realise te ara kokorangi, te ara toi ora?
The journey started back in the 80s. When, Māori wahine got together and started to think about practice and how they could support other wahine Māori around the motu to work with whānau who had been impacted by sexual abuse. Well, at least around 2009 and maybe before then, Ngā Kaitiaki Mauri, it was on their hearts to really think about what Kaupapa Māori guidelines would look like and to publish them so that we could support the development of other Kaupapa Māori services across the country. So there was that seed that germinated.
And what barriers did you come up against?
I need to skip up now to 2017 because it was a long process thinking about how we might achieve that, how we might get funding for that project. In 2017 we made a formal application to a community funder. First of all, it was about the community funders recognising that these were really important, and the feedback from them was that they didn't see sufficient social need or social value for having a set of Kaupapa Māori guidelines. Prior to getting that feedback, MSD had already said to us, if there is a problem, come to us and we'll see what we can do, because they were really keen for us to move forward with it. And I mention that because I think it's really important in this case to see that we're in a time where government is actually moving ahead in their thinking. So that's how our relationship with MSD around funding started to develop. Initially, we were talking with MSD and ACC, both of which had been involved with Tō Nest and Ngā Kaitiaki Mauri in particular, and we began the negotiation process. Now, an issue arose around intellectual property. At that point, Ngā Kaitiaki Mauri decided not to proceed with any funding that might have that attached to it, the ownership belonging to a government department, or even for a government department to have access to it, so that, because there's another legal term and I can't quite recall what that is, where they could have access to it and use parts of it, So it was a really important principle because so often Indigenous knowledge has been misappropriated, and that's not just here in Aotearoa, but internationally that happens too often. So we were determined that we would proceed with the guidelines somehow, and with the help of our tupuna, I think, because that's about all that we had at that time. And then what happened eventually, I think there were a number of things that were occurring. There was the wellbeing budget in 2019, and us holding our ground, and the right people in the right places within MSD that really had a heart for what we needed to do, and we're aware that was a really important project. So with all of those things together, we kept negotiating, and at that stage we were still just negotiating at that point with MSD. Others left the table. And we came to a satisfactory conclusion where we could make sure that anything that was produced could be made available to Kaupapa Māori services and practitioners, but it would be with the tautoko of Ngā Kaitiaki Mauri. So we got to see where these guidelines would end up. and make sure they got to the right places. So it was a really good outcome in that respect. So it took a while, and so from I guess 2009 and then beginning the journey in 2017 with those discussions, we finally, I think it was about 2019 where we got a one-off grant, we were given a one-off grant, and then 2020 where we were fully funded by MSD.
You've seen Te Aorere Kura and the shifts and the actions that are going forward. Shift 3 is specifically around some workforce capability and capacity. What role do you think the Kaupapa Māori Good Practice Guidelines will be able to play in the...
Well, I think that we have just produced those just at the right time for you and for Te Aorere Kura, because, you know, if you're looking at workforce capability, then you need to be able to have some sort of guide for our workforce whānau to be able to centre on. Now, it's interesting because sometimes, you know, in our mahi, our work, and, you know, you talk to different Māori, outsiders or non-Māori might call our work innovative, but in fact what we're doing is drawing from, you know, knowledge that's ancient. Yeah, mātauranga. So it's that knowledge that's been collected and as a guide for practitioners. So I think that any training type programs need to align with what the guidelines say and not the other way around. I think that they are, it's called Te Ara Kokorangi, Te Ara Toiora, and it's not coincidental, I don't think, that they're being launched in Matariki, you know, the rising of Puanga, the rising of Matariki. So if we think about how the stars used to guide us, you know, our tupuna, and so that we could navigate, I think in the same way we can think of these guidelines as being guides for our whānau. So, and guides for those who are developing these, you know, the programs within government. You know, I'm not quite sure the structures that you're working with in order to implement Te Aorere Kura and to develop workforce capability.